Hey everyone, it's Ivan at KitBadger.com, out here for another gear review, and today, talking optics. This little guy right here, which is the Holosun 507C X2 with the ACSS Vulcan Reticle. So what the hell does all of that stuff mean? Well, the 507C is the Holosun, which you may or may not be familiar with. Basically, we have 10 different brightness settings, 10 daylight as well as 2 night vision. And across the top, we have solar cell, which is handy when the sun comes out. Then of course, battery compartment over on the side, and some other pretty cool things to include basically a machined aluminum housing. And there's actually little holes, one on this side, one on this side, for when you get water in there, which is happening now as that snow is starting to melt. That got stuck in there. But ACSS Vulcan Reticle, what is that? So primary arms ended up actually, basically, I don't know who licensed who. Basically, Holosun made some of their optics, to include this 507C, with their ACSS Vulcan Reticle. So ACSS reticle, may or may not be familiar with, basically Chevron and usually some other stuff with that. So with this, you actually have a 10 MOA Chevron in there. And then you also have, I want to say it's 100 MOA, 100 plus MOA circle. So when you look through this, if you don't immediately see, which I didn't right there, if you don't immediately see your Chevron, then you will see some edge of that giant 100 MOA circle. And so that is immediately giving you a correction. Think about looking through a paper towel tube. So when you look through it, if you're not looking through perfectly, you basically have some shadowing, just like looking through a scope or something like that, right? Well, there's only so much material to work with in this housing as far as being able to see some type of shadow. So you have this giant ring, and any part of that ring is visible, like, oh, correct, boom, there I am, centered up. Really easy, really intuitive. With all that said, what has been my experience with this optic? Well, I actually have 2 of them. This one right here, which is red, and they also make one with a green reticle, which I actually have on a SIG. And I've been really pleased with these things. They're really cool. So as a matter of course, in training, present, search for the front sight, search for the front sight. When you do that, probably gonna see your dot, which is great, and that should ideally be built in. But, if you're a new shooter, there's a lot of things going on, and yeah, ideally search for that front sight, but being able to just throw this up and immediately see some sort of correction inside that window so that you get perfectly aligned, that is huge. And so I think honestly, for anyone getting into shooting dots, I think it is great. And you're like, well, perfect sight picture every time I present the gun. Awesome, you're cool. But how's your sight picture when you present the gun from some sort of weird unconventional position? Probably not as good, and there you are back searching for that front sight so that you can get your dot inside that window and make your shots. This also is huge for that, basically alleviates that to where some sort of weird unconventional position, one hand, whatever it may be, and boom, there's your dot, make your shot. I think it is really, really cool. As far as my experience with this optic, again, shot it on a couple different guns in a couple different classes, to include on this right here, which is my Gen 3 Glock 17. And a quick aside, if you're unfamiliar, Danger Close Armament, they sell all kinds of gun accessories, to include guns, I believe. And one of the cool things they actually do is slide milling. If you have older guns, which a lot of people have, nowadays, most of your guns are gonna come with optic plates, things like that. But I definitely had to search around, find someone to cut this. And if you're familiar with trying to find someone to cut your slide, usually there is a very long wait time. If you're looking to get a slide cut, check out Danger Close Armament. They actually have a really quick turnaround and pretty good prices. So solid option, keep you from having to wait forever to get your slide cut. but I ended up shooting it on this pistol here with this slide cut, and to that end also, it uses an RMR footprint, which for all intents and purposes, pretty much gold standard as far as optics go, and it did really good. I do like the fact that you can go from daylight settings to night settings, and to that end, a couple different modes. One, there's auto mode, so it's on autopilot. It's sensing light and basically adjusting it for what it thinks ambient is, which is cool, but sometimes it's difficult to, especially if you're shooting in the dark, shooting with white light, it's not quick enough and maybe smart enough lots of times to give you the right amount of illumination for those settings. So to that end, personally, I have it set to manual. You have plus, minus, basically adjust up and down right there, and you can drop all the way down in those two night vision settings. So again, shot this in a couple courses, this one on this pistol, then I also shot it on a SIG P320. I believe it's their Legion, or not their Legion, their X5 rather. And with that, a Grey Ghost precision slide that was again cut for an RMR, and that did awesome. I actually shot that in a 3-day night vision course with Amtac shooting, and yeah, thing does great. One thing that's interesting is got some footage basically shooting through pistol at night under nods and using a mission recorder. When I was shooting through, you actually see through your night vision that giant circle. I have no idea why, but when you're actually shooting this in the day, you present, if you have your Chevron, that circle is nowhere to be seen, and you just break your shots normally. Pretty damn sweet. Also, when I'd mentioned those modes too, one thing I do like is essentially smart circuitry, in that when you have this thing turned off and then you turn it on, it goes back to whatever it was last at. And to turn it off, you basically just press and hold both of them for a moment. That is nice, rather than having to start somewhere and scroll through everything to get to the setting you're looking for, which is pretty cool. And the other feature built into these is essentially shake awake. So this will be sitting somewhere, nightstand, whatever it may be. As soon as you pick it up, Optic comes on, rather than just running it forever. That said, battery life, fairly significant. I think I've had to change this, I don't know, in the last year, I think I maybe changed the battery once. So pretty significant amount of battery life. I will say, in use, this is probably my favorite pistol mounted optic. Two fronts. One, that massive, I think like 250 MOA circle, to where when you present, if you don't immediately get your dot, you're getting that correction. So you're like, boom, okay, there's my dot. And that is awesome. The other side of it is that Chevron. For me personally, stigmatism, Chevron's way cleaner than most dots for me. And I actually like that I can actually refine my aiming point. So rather than put the dot on it, no, like I can actually put the tip of that Chevron on it, or depending on how far it is, there's actually basically a ballistic drop. Like in the manual, it shows you for, I think 9mm, 45, 40, 5.56, 308, and 7.62 by 39, 300 blackout. Basically rough estimates as far as when you're looking through with respect to the Chevron and where the target is in relation to Chevron, different distances, which is pretty cool. Being able to basically refine that sight picture, especially if you're doing more than just shooting cardboard at like 7 yards. So yeah, I think it's pretty rad. Is there anything I don't like? Yes. It's 2022. As of filming this, still an exposed emitter. Depending on where you are and what you do, that may or may not mean things, but at the end of the day, an exposed emitter can allow things to get into it and basically block your image that's getting projected onto that little window. And so I would love for basically this reticle to get put into basically one of the other Holosuns where they actually have that enclosed emitter. because that reticle itself I think is incredible, especially again the chevron and that massive circle. And if we could basically cover it all up and closed emitter, I think that would probably be the best thing going, like turnkey. If you're looking at getting a pistol mounted optic, I would give this a hard look. Again, two different fronts. One is a new shooter. That on-ramp to proficiency, incredibly short. I remember the first time someone handed me a gun with a red dot, I'm like, is this on? Like, I don't see it. And they're like, look for the front sight, and you're like, oh, okay, there it is. This gives you those immediate corrections. So boom, correction, dot, break your shot, which is awesome, especially as a new shooter. Or depending on where you are skill-wise, if you're shooting from like weird unconventional positions, makes it so much easier. Again, if you're not immediately behind it because you're shooting something awkward, correction, dot, break your shot. Thing is awesome. And if you have an old gun that you need milled, check out Danger Close Armament. They do a great job, pretty quick turnaround, and yeah, be able to get your optic on pretty much whatever gun you have, which is cool. But again, I would definitely give them a hard look, kind of regardless of where you are on that spectrum, especially if they end up making an enclosed emitter version, which would be the best. But overall, pretty stoked on this thing. And lastly, if you appreciate my content and want to support it, greatly appreciate it. Whether it's liking and sharing videos or going over to kitbadger.com, picking up KBAT target pads, stickers, patches, things like that, helps me go out and create more content for you. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.